Something many of us Westerners don't know is that the last emperor of Ming, Yongli, was actually very supportive of Christianity and almost became a Catholic. We must know that in this period, the Ming dynasty wasn't having a good time. The reason was that Emperor Chongzhen had to deal with many threats from a series of famines in the 1630s and early 1640s to rebellions in Shanxi, Huguang, and the Henan provinces, and also incursions by the Manchu from the north. On February 1644, a rebel warlord named Li Zhensheng proclaimed the foundation of his own Shun dynasty in Xi'an, 500 miles southwest of Beijing. He went with his army to the capital of the empire. The imperial treasures were also empty. On the 10th of February, Chongzhen was advised to flee from Beijing. After 2 months of debate and indecision, he chose to stay. The same day, imperial astronomers reported that the pole star, the emperor's personal symbol, had fallen in the skies, indicating bad luck. But Chongzhen disregarded the omen. On the 23rd of April, Li Zicheng's army had reached the city's suburbs. On this, the emperor became insane. He got drunk and used his sword to rampage the palace, killing one of his concubines and hurting his daughters, and making his own wife end her own life. Chongzhen himself then made a failed attempt to flee the city. Dressed as a commoner, he was driven back to the palace by his own soldiers, who mistook him for a spy. When in the next morning he was going to a meeting with his advisors, none went to see him. They had abandoned him. Chongzhen had a tragic fate, hanging himself later, and with him the empire that lasted 277 years fell in one day. And the empire of the invaders, by the way, only lasted 6 weeks. We see how tragic was the fate of the Ming dynasty. This Ming dynasty that was also very supportive of the Christians. The Jesuit Matteo Ricci, for example, brought with him a lot of technologies from Europe that impressed the Chinese, including the Confucianists, who saw in those men of Christ an ally against the Buddhists, who had disagreements with the Confucianists. But now, this Ming dynasty, after the falling of Chongzhen and the fall of Beijing, had only the lands on the south and became known as the South Ming dynasty. The last emperor of this dynasty was called Emperor Yongli. His family and the people around him were baptized. For example, his official mother, that is, his father's official wife, received baptism as Empress Helena. His biological mother was also baptized as Maria, his wife also receiving the name of Anna. His son was also baptized, receiving the name of Constantine, a very symbolic name. They were all converted and baptized by the German Jesuit Andreas Xavier Koffler. Now, fearing the Manchu, the emperor asked the Polish Jesuit Michael Boym to send a letter to Europe to the Doge of Venice, the Pope, and the King of Portugal, asking them help against the enemy who wanted to invade them. This was his only hopes against the Qing dynasty, the Manchu. Michael then went to Europe, but got no help from Venice, who was already planning to trade with the ascending dynasty of Qing. Nor the Pope Alexander VII gave him more than blessing to the resisting Ming dynasty, nor the Portuguese gave more than promises of help. The Jesuit then went in his journey back to China, but ended up dying in 1659. Yongli later tried to flee to the Burmese kingdom, but the king gave him over to the Manchus, and this was officially the end of the South Ming dynasty, who supported the Christian missionaries that went to the empire. But we must not think that after that, the Qing dynasty decided to prohibit Christianity in the empire. The new dynasty accepted the presence of the faith, but the emperor would not let himself be baptized, because he could not abandon the harem that he had. But one Jesuit who wrote a book called China Illustrata, called Athanasius Kircher, tells us that the Jesuits tried to give the emperor the last sacraments and the baptize, but that the Buddhist monk didn't let them enter the room where he was, and Christianity was only banned after the Pope heard that the Chinese Christians had a big veneration for their ancestors, which many confused for idolatry. The Pope then prohibited the Chinese Christians to participate in those venerations, and the Emperor Kangxi from the Qing dynasty banned them in 1721. This was Historiae Moriae, and you should subscribe for more obscure facts of history. Goodbye.